Welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. The club's purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution of Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting and supporting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations and creating quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of our community. My name is Mike Ungar, and I'm the CEO of the Industry 4.0 Club. I have over 40 years of leadership experience, most of that in manufacturing at Michelin. I'm joined today by my co-host, Mike Yost. Mike is chairman of the club. Mike, would you introduce yourself and then introduce Emily for us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Emily. Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Mike Yost. As Mike said, I'm his co-host. I'm the volunteer chairman of the organization. I have been in the industry for about 35 years, with the last 15 on the industrial nonprofit side. So really excited to have Emily here with us today to talk about who would have imagined that Industry 4.0 would improve baking bagels. If there's anybody that would have guessed that, I'm sure it's somebody involved with our club. But we're joined by Emily Winston, who's the founder and the CEO of Boichik Bagels. She began Boichik Bagels as a pop-up in 2017 and now has 12 shops in California, plus sells through wholesale. The bagels have been acclaimed by no less than the New York Times as being arguably better than those found in New York. She has a degree in mechanical engineering and transportation technology and policy from Cornell and from UC Davis, and calls herself a bagel engineer. For those listeners on LinkedIn, if you have any questions for Emily, go ahead and put them in the comment box. We will do our best to address them through our discussion today. So welcome, Emily.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So Emily, the first question when we hear about someone who's a mechanical engineer, now is a bagel engineer, if you will, how did you get from mechanical engineering to being a bagel baker, if you will?
Yeah, well, that was not planned at all. And if you told me 20 years ago that this is what I'd be doing, I would probably laugh at you and tell you were nuts. But I've always just liked figuring things out. How do things work? How do things work? How do we make them better? How do we make things more efficient? That's why I'm an engineer. I feel like we're all a special kind of lazy where we want to do anything we can to shave a few minutes of actual effort off of something. We'll spend 6 months creating a process that saves 2 minutes a day for the rest of your life is a very appealing thing for engineers. But I had started working for General Motors. I had done some hydrogen and fuel cell vehicle work. But I had moved to the Bay Area in 2010, and I was really sad about the lack of good bagels here. I thought they were all terrible. I'm like, I'm just not going to bother eating them. I'll wait. My family is all still back in New Jersey. So I'm like, I'll just go eat bagels when I visit home, and that's fine. And then in 2011, I got the horrible news that my very, very favorite bagel shop in Manhattan had been shut down for tax fraud. And that was H&H Bagels, the original H&H Bagels. I was so devastated that my very favorite bagel was now no longer going to exist that I thought maybe I could figure out how to make it. Because there had been a couple of bagel pop-ups in the Bay Area. And I went to one and it was like, well, this is a decent bagel. So to me, I'm like, well, that means it's possible. If they made a decent bagel, it wasn't like my dream bagel, but it was totally respectable. That means the whole thing about it's the water is just a myth. If you can make a good bagel, a decent bagel with our local water, I said, okay, well, let me try. So it just became this obsessive new hobby because I'm good at obsessive hobbies. So I would and it wasn't every day, but it would be like every few weeks, or there'd be a party or potluck or whatever. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to make up a batch of bagels. And I would, my KitchenAid mixer, I could only make 12 bagels worth of dough at a time. So I'd make like an A, B, and C and change some variable and try all these different things and different recipes and, bring them to the parties. And there was certain groups I would show up to with bagels regularly that then I had, everyone was eating the bagels, but I would have certain people in the crowd who were like either from the East Coast or Jewish or both, or for whatever reason had, real knowledge of bagels, wasn't some native Californian.
A bagel acumen, one would say.
Yes, had some proven bagel acumen. And we would parse. I'd be like, okay, now we're gonna sniff the bagel lick the bagels. We're going to open it up and, all these things. Look, examine the crumb. And because I had been big into wine tasting at one point. So we're going to like really dive into this and then say like, do we like A, B, or C better? And how does this compare to the batch I made last time? And it just evolved over time. And 5 years later, I had a bagel that was fantastic. And some of my friends were telling me I should sell them. And I was kind of in the spot where I'm like, you know what, it'd be fun to just go ahead and try that. Because every few years I would think about getting an MBA because I've always had kind of an interest in business to some extent. And then I would decide like, oh, that's too much effort, or I don't feel like doing it, or I don't feel like going into debt for an MBA. So I was like, okay, well, I could kind of do my own pretend MBA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being in the Bay Area, I'm very fortunate place to be. We have a huge foodie scene, big food entrepreneurship. People are starting up food businesses all the time. So I was able to connect with a whole bunch of resources here. So there were food entrepreneurship classes. There was like
food. Well, I bet they shut down as fast as they start up out there, though, don't they?
Not as there's a lot that fail. There are a lot that fail. That is very true. Food is not an easy business. So it's really interesting, but I was like, I'll try this out and, learn a bunch, and did these pop-ups, and it was a smash hit, and people went nuts for them.
How did you go from your stand mixer making 12 at a time to making production scale? Did you go?
Yeah, well, that was a big thing. So yeah, the pop-up I was still doing out of my house. We have a cottage food law in California, so I was able to officially sell the bagels I was making in my house with my KitchenAid mixer. But when I did this pop-up, I'm like, it wasn't a plan. I was never planning on this being a business. It was really just a beta test, because one of my instructors said, it's great that your friends tell you how amazing your bagels are when they're A, your friends, and B, eating them for free. Of course, they're going to tell you they're great. Right. How about strangers paying you money? I'm like, that's a test we need to do. So that was really the point of the pop-up plan. And right away, the answer was yes. Strangers were very eager to throw money at me and beg for more. So I did a lot of soul searching, and then a whole lot more kind of projection analysis, and decided that this looked like it was really compelling and it could be a great business, and decided to do it. But I said, okay, if I'm going to go, it's going to be real. I need to build a real bagel shop, because the rolling by hand is just terrible. I was developing carpal tunnel problems just from doing these like 100 bagels at a time. And it's because it's the ultimate in like your wrist is like all the way back, and you're pushing down, and it's not good. So just, rolling a couple dozen is one thing. Getting into over 100 it turns into something else. So I knew, I'm like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be, I want a rolling machine. I want the proper oven. I'd studied all these videos of shops in New York with the big revolving deck ovens. I'm like, I need all of these things. I need the bagel kettle. I want to do exactly kind of what they've been doing in New York. This was what I've been studying. When I'd go home to visit, I'd go into Manhattan. I'd snoop around and I'd ask questions and see if anyone would talk to me. And I would take photos and video and examine, like, what is that oven? And, just take notes on all the equipment. So I'm like, I want to do it right. I want all of that stuff. So it needs a whole shop. And I'm like, all right, this is going to cost me about $600,000 to do that out here.
Wow.
And so I started raising money. I said I was offering promissory notes. And so I put that out to my email list. And I had a number, there were definitely friends who decided to lend me money. I said, I'll pay you, I think it was 10% interest, if you loan me money to do this. And I also got people who I didn't know at all who wrote to me. They're like, oh, we're interested. So I would show up. I would actually I'd bake like a couple dozen bagels, and I'd show up at their house, and I'd throw down a bag of bagels and a tub of cream cheese. And they hadn't even had the bagels yet. They just had heard about me. They'd taste the bagels. They'd say, these are amazing. And they'd write me a check for $5,000 or $10,000.
Wow.
And so that's how I raised the money to build the shop.
That's really cool.
It was cool. It was really nice.
So when you built the shop, what was I mean, we've got a local bagel deli here, and like there's not a lot of space behind her, so she sells, she's a deli. In the back, she bakes the bagels, and so there's not any room for automation back there. Did you start the same way?
So I started with a retail-sized rolling machine, so which are a lot smaller than the videos will show, but it's still substantial. It's like 10 feet long, and it's a contraption. But we would take, so we're mixing the dough. We take the dough, put it in the hopper here, and it kind of measures out a chunk of dough, flattens it out. It replicates hand rolling. It rolls it out like a snake, and then goes through this it gets shoved around a mandrel, so the ends get shoved together, and then it pops out. But this retail size machine, it comes out, it's like 1 a second. It goes like a chunk. And we have to have an employee picking up each bagel at the end of the line. They pick it up, they put it on a board. They pick up the bagel, put it on a board. And we do this 24 times. And then we take the board and we put it on the rack. We take another board, we sprinkle it with cornmeal, pick the bagels. And, meanwhile, there's been a little backlog. It's kind of the I Love Lucy in the candy factory scenario, but no one's inhaling the raw dough. Sometimes it hits the floor instead, but it's just this chunk. And every bagel is getting picked up and put on the board. And, it's a pretty tedious affair, but that's the retail size automation. And that's available. Tons of bagel shops use this.
Was that the 600K to get to that point?
The 600K, yeah, the 600K was the original retail store. That was everything. That was, I need to, there's going to be a remodel of the space, and construction is super expensive out here. That's like the rent, the initial rents, the everything, the architect fees, all the plumbing and electrical work and whatever, demo and new drywall and, the mixer, the machine, the oven, the kettle, the installation of all these things, all of it.
Yeah. So you hadn't really done Industry 4.0, really hadn't done any real automation. I mean, a little bit with the rolling, but you hadn't really gone to the next step at all.
No, this started with just the very basic, very standard, just this machine, we put the dough in, it pops out the bagels, but it's definitely saves a ton. It's automated compared to hand rolling, which is definitely a lot of work. And it's one thing to have someone do it in New York where there's tons of skilled bagel rollers around, but we don't really have that in California. We have to, and it's a lot. And I know about bagel shops, and then I just had someone. I have these owners of a bagel shop said they were going to come visit me tomorrow. They want to see my automation, and they just emailed me yesterday to cancel. They said, "Oh, our like production guy has just got sick, so we have to stay and we have to do all that work because they can't just hand it off to anyone because it's a lot of very physical work, and you can't just throw anyone in without a ton of training. And it's hard. You have to keep them because you've gotten that there's this tough thing, and a ton of people, most people wind up with carpal tunnel problems or other kind of just nerve or wrist problems. So it's not fun. And I'm like, let's let machinery do that. But yeah, so I started with that was the extent of the automation. And then so about a year went by, and then the New York Times article came out saying, sorry, New York, these are some of the best bagels anywhere. And it blew the roof off the place. And we had these lines. It was a 2-hour long line, like going around the block. It was just totally bananas. And I thought everyone in the Bay Area already knew about us, but apparently not, because there's the floodgates opened. Things were totally nuts for several months. And when that calmed down to when we were at a new higher plateau, I said, okay, well, now I have some more big decisions to make, because I could either just stay here in my wildly successful bagel shop and just kind of roll with it, or
no pun intended, of course.
What's that?
No pun intended, of course.
Oh no, yes, no,
rolling
never.
with it.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna get bored with the one shop because that's what I do. I'm like, and I think it'd be fun to build this and try to go big, because one of the things I've done for most of my life is play really nerdy strategy games like Civilization. And it's like, yeah, how do we take our resources and deploy them and build the empires and, do all, do this. I'm like, so in my mind, I'm playing a game like that where my bagel armies are going out and we're building a new store. It's like a new outpost in the bagel civilization. And there's, we're fighting the lousy bagels and trying to vanquish them. So it's fun. I'm like, I want to build it. So I said, okay, the first thing I want to do is I don't want to do it, just replicate exactly the store places, because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of skill that goes into this, even just the mixing of the dough to just the right point. This rolling machine I had was quite a piece of work. Really takes some like mechanically very capable people to like keep it in good form. So let me make a centralized production facility where we're going to make all the dough, and I could, and then we send it out, but I can really invest and do more automation. And that's where I'm like, okay, now how do I want to make this. I want to be able to make 50,000 pieces a day, and started talking to the manufacturers. I'm like, let me do this right. And I want it to be less and less work, because no one wants to be, it's like, it was, annoying enough to do for 5,000, pick the bagel up, put it on the board. That's, terrible enough. But to make that 10X, that really gets tedious. It's, it's already tedious. And I don't want an army of people just doing dumb work like that. The bagel doesn't improve by someone picking it up and putting it down. It's not like that's adding anything to it. So my thing as an engineer and a foodie is I want to make this excellent bagel that I want to eat. Now, if I can get there, make it easier and easier to produce that bagel, as long as the bagel is coming out fantastic, then I'm happy to make it easier and easier to get there. There's no reason to suffer if we're getting to the same final destination.
Well, if I could just jump in for a second, Emma, just to remind everybody that we're talking with Emily Winston here about who would have imagined that Industry 4.0 would improve by baking bagels. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in. I believe you have some videos of your current operation. Would you want to?
Yeah. Let's play.
Let's
play some of those. So we can look at this.
So
this automation line.
We're going to look at this, and then I'm interested in what was this maybe the first level of automation or that you went to. So let's put it up on, and maybe you can describe it as it's going. So hang on, here we go.
Yeah, so this is looking at the kind of the early part of the line. So up on the left is the big dough hopper where the dough went in. It's kind of coming up that ramp. So it kind of rolls it into a big log, comes up this ramp. In the machine on that end, it's kind of rolling it smaller and then cutting it into chunks. And those are getting rolled out, shaped into bagels. And this is called a two-lane system for obvious reasons. So we have two at a time coming through. And now, but we have a number of things happening here on the left where we can't really see, but we can see the boards coming in from the left, right in front of us here. The boards are being automatically pulled from a stack of boards. They're being automatically dusted with cornmeal, set down here, and then this is using sensors and dropping the bagels two at a time. We get the 24 and then off it goes. So we're automating a whole bunch of things from the original setup. We're taking, instead of cutting chunks of dough and lifting it, putting it into the hopper, we have a whole automated thing here where the whole bowl of dough is getting dumped in. That saves a lot of awkward lifting and potential back problems for employees. We are taking, we're making it, this is a lot faster. We're not even running at full speed on this yet, but we're taking, pulling each board out. We're automating the cornmeal. We're automating dropping them on the boards. And then we can switch to the next video where we take those boards and put them on the rack. And that was a separate source I got for that piece of automation.
Yeah. Did you design this yourself, or is this something you have to buy off?
No, I did not, create this on my own. So there's two main companies in the industrial bagel world. that make this such an equipment. And so this is, you can see this is Bake Tech, and they happen to be based in Livermore, which is an hour away from me. So they're in my backyard. I met them fairly early on, hit it off with them. They're great. So when I decided, I'm like, okay, I want to build this factory. I want to take a step up in automation. I was, talking to them since I had that idea, and I'm like, it's like, okay, well, they're like, how many do we want? And so they have that's considered actually a baby industrial system for them. That's 2 lanes. Like when they make machinery for like Sara Lee bagel factories, and it'll be like 6, 8, or 10 lanes. So it's like, 10, it's like a sea of bagel dough. It's really crazy to see it, but it's like, 10 at a time go and all off on conveyor belts and all this cool stuff. So I got like their baby system, but with all the bells, extra automated bells and whistles. Cause I'm like, I don't need crazy high volume, but I want the automation because I don't want to have my employees doing, pretty gimpy work all day long and, getting chronic, repetitive stress injuries, having back problems, going out on workers' comp, hating their job and quitting it, and having high turnover. So I'm really proud that for a food business, we actually have relatively very low turnover because I try to not make their jobs miserable. We try to make it easier. Now they can be watching, now the guys on dough production are really monitoring the machines and just like fixing them when something's wrong or one bagel falls on top of another. They're managing the machine instead of them doing all the base work themselves. So it's a way more pleasant job for them. But that was the whole thing. It's like, I want this automation. Let's do it. Labor is getting more expensive everywhere. It's very expensive in California. We just don't need, we can make a fantastic bagel without making people do this grunt work. Mm-hmm. And so let's do that.
Well, I think it's great. You're really talking about, first of all, lean principles. Eliminate waste, eliminate things that don't add value to your product. And that's what you're really describing, which I think is really great. And then you're using automation to do that. So it's really a combination of lean and Industry 4.0. And I guess we're gonna see the next step you've taken. Want to put that up on the screen now?
Yeah.
All right, let's add that. Maybe you could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so this is where the next piece, if we like flip the camera the other way, where those full boards of bagels were coming out now. So this is from a different manufacturer, but we're taking a Universal Robotics arm. Apex Manufacturing took, they specialize in taking these and putting them out for the baking industry. So the bakeries come to them. They're like, we want something to pick up sheet pans and stack them or unstack them, excuse me, or whatever. There's actually really cool things they've done where it like will hold, there'll be like a cake, like a sheet cake on a pan, and they'll combine the arm with what's called a unifiller, where it's basically it's a machine that will kind of squirt, a certain volume in a certain way, whatever. And you can put all these different attachments. So you could put like icing, like little icing attachments on there, and it'll squirt icing. So and the arm will take the cake and kind of move it around, and they'll do like cake decorating with this robotics, where it'll like kind of make it, and then it comes out as like this beautifully decorated cake. So it's all this really cool stuff that they've done. So I came to them and I said, when I realized, I'm like, well, if we're going to have a full board come off the line every 8 seconds, that's really not going to be fun. That's going to be someone's full-time job, just picking this board up, which is about 12 to 15 pounds. Pick it up, put it on the rack. We're reaching high, we're reaching low. They're coming pretty fast. You can't, it's every 8 seconds. It's just this short enough time that you can't do anything else, but not so fast. Like, it's just going to be not fun. This is going to be a whole heap of not fun. And I've seen factories where they actually have workers doing that. They'll have like 3 workers that their whole job is just picking up these boards and putting them on racks. And like, that looks terrible. That looks just awful. I don't want to do it. I'd much rather have a robot doing that work. So I talked to them. So what we have, you notice these are all wooden boards. These are called proof boards.
I'm going to show that again here. Hang on. Wait.
So you can kind of, it's not a metal sheet pan. These wooden boards that really let the dough breathe better on the bottom. So we have that cornmeal layer, and the cornmeal acts as like ball bearings under the dough, because we don't want it to just stick and like glue itself to whatever surface we're putting it on. And then it also just allows the whole dough to breathe and ferment better. So from here, we then take this rack full of dough and it goes into the refrigerator to have a slow ferment overnight. So that's where we really develop the flavor and the skin is this half of the process, and like really letting it age for 18 hours. So we came to them. We said, hey, I see you. I'm looking at your website. You've done all this great stuff, but I don't see that you've done anything with proof boards. Here's the application I've got happening. Is this something you'd be interested in doing? And they said, oh yeah, like we'd love to do that. So I had to send them a rack and some boards, and they created the end of arm tooling specifically for my application that they hadn't needed to do before, with this like basically fingers and a thumb, and it locks the board and it takes it. So now they can use it, they can use that for other companies too, but they've got a new whole piece in their arsenal they developed specifically for me.
So I'm wondering, Emily, like where does innovation come in the bagel industry? Like, do you look and say that there are opportunities to innovate in the manufacturing process, or adding new flavors, or new combinations of things, or new packaging options, or like where do you see innovation in the future?
There is more innovation to be done. Actually, something I'm working on right now is we're starting to play with par baking as a thing that's kind of entered the industry recently, and I got wind of that, and I'm like, well, I want to experiment with this, and
what did you call it?
Par baking. So where you would take, you start baking the bagels the normal way, but you stop them before they finish baking, like where they've risen, but they're just starting to brown, and you pull that out of the oven. So like if you go to the grocery store and you'll see like take and bake, something called like take and bake bread. That's par baked, where it's the right shape, but it's pale and kind of soft, and it's like, oh, you're going to finish baking it at home. Okay. So you can either have that fresh or you can freeze it. So with this process we've been developing is, we par bake it, let it cool, freeze them, and then we can actually send it to another store, and they can then finish them. Actually, we'll have them seed on site. And finish baking, but it's like in under 10 minutes, we can go from a frozen par baked bagel to a finished hot bagel, which can let us produce, keep a small amount of like, it's almost just in time bagels.
Yeah.
So it's almost, not quite, because we don't want to make everyone wait, 10 plus minutes for every single bagel. But I'm like, I thought about that. I'm like, wouldn't it be really cool if every time you ordered a bagel, it was baked to order? But we can't, it's just not fast enough to get quite there, but it's, getting there, it's a lot closer. So we can just say, we can have just a few dozen bagels in stock at any point. And as people are buying them, we're replenishing them.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. My local bagel place, when they're out of sesame bagels at 11 o'clock they're out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really cool, because then they can actually
we would never be out.
Yeah, they can actually
do out anything and your flavor. So you could walk in, it could be and that's one of that's always been the big challenge with bagels, is that a bagel's life is only one day. That's the bane of the bagel's existence, is that it's a 1 day product, unless you freeze it. Like what we do for wholesale is we slice them and freeze them in 6-packs. So I call it picking up where lenders left off. It's just with an excellent bagel, and it stays great in your freezer, and you just take it on, you toast it, and it's great. But with this, it's like, you're getting this, almost just in time bagel. Normally, so we have to make, the dough takes 24 hours to make. So you can't just make more dough on the fly and make more bagels. So we're always setting the production for the next day based on like what pre-orders do we have, and also just
Right.
What do we think is going to happen tomorrow? What's the weather looking like? Do we think it's going to be, and we're often wrong. So either we run out early of certain flavors because they're already done baking at some point, or it rains and then we're left with several hundred bagels that we, donate somewhere. But this lets us we're just keep the stock very low. And someone could walk in 10 minutes to closing and say, hey, I want 12 dozen salt and pepper bagels. And we can say, cool, we'll have that for you in 10 minutes. And you could walk out with piping hot bagels, anything you want.
Well, and you could imagine a Kanban system then that you put in place. And, when you got down to whatever the timing would be, but you reduce your waste dramatically.
Yep.
And always satisfy your customer.
Yep. And for the most part, giving people a better bagel experience, because there's the bagel, like, no matter what. So when we have, even the traditional system, you can get a bagel like super fresh out of the oven, like within a few minutes, let's say within 5 minutes. That, like, we'll define that as the 100% like peak bagel experience. But really it has a short half-life. So it starts to decay. Now it's still excellent, a few hours later. So we're still at like, a 95 or something. But it is starting to decay. But if we have with the par bake, even if we say, okay, well, it's not exactly that same level of perfection, but we could say, okay, instead when that par bake comes out, it's a 99. So we're never like getting exactly there, but because we're just baking these smaller things into order, we get to consistently give people like a 96 to 99 experience instead of a 100 to 90, where there's
that's really cool.
Bring it up and make it a more consistent, more excellent experience. Because getting a bagel that's still warm, because a lot of people, especially in California, everyone thinks you should toast a bagel. Everyone here, they were all taught that your bagel's supposed to be toasted, and it makes me crazy. As an East Coaster, I'm like, a good bagel that's fresh, you do not need to toast. But they really feel that way, and I'm like, and especially if it's been been sitting out of the oven for a while and it's gotten cold. Right. Okay, fine. But this, I want to be able to push like, no, this bagel is hot and fresh, and you do not want or need to toast it.
Well, you know what you sound like. I'm in South Carolina, right? So we have Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yep, just like that. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it's like the light goes on, and it's hot and fresh donuts, right? And I can just see that happening now in Boichik Bagels. The light goes on, and we've got hot and fresh bagels all the time.
All the time, yeah.
That's really cool.
But if you want Krispy Kreme hot and fresh, I don't want the Krispy Kreme that's many hours.
Exactly. It's the same thing. It's
totally different. They have this even shorter shelf life than a bagel. That's it's decaying fast.
Well, Emily, we've been talking for half an hour now, and so I would like to kind of wrap things up. And so I have to ask. You've talked about the production of bagels, and I don't want you to give away anything too special here, but what is the secret ingredient? What makes a great bagel? What's the one thing that people behind the scenes answer? Is there one you're willing to give?
Yeah, I would say malt. Actually, really using malt syrup is a key ingredient to get that bagel flavor, and it's a pain. It's the most expensive ingredient that goes into bagels, and it's a pain to work with. It's stickier than honey, but it really makes the bagel pop, and it gives it that flavor. And I think love and care is the other piece, and just being picky. My whole, I never understood. I'm like, why am I the one to like crack the code that people have been complaining about for decades out here? Why has no one figured this out? I'm like, I'm not a chef. I don't come from being a baker, but I'm just picky. I'm like, I wanted it to taste like what I wanted, and I wouldn't, that was my quest, was to find that flavor, and just, it took 5 years to get there, and that was fine because it wasn't a business plan, but wanting it to come out a certain way has been, a
fantastic
big magic.
Fantastic. Well, so as we wrap up, Mike, any final thoughts on listening to Emily now? And then Emily, I'd like to get your final thoughts for the audience as well. Mike, maybe go first.
Yeah, I think I need to get to California and find one of these pop-up shops and partake, try one. So, you know, Emily started talking about working in hydrogen fuel cells, and you know, the same principles that apply to lean processes and continuous improvement and incremental gains apply here to manufacturing the bagels. And so to hear her talk about the health of and safety of our workers, the quality of the product, the peak experience, I mean, those are all really, really important things. So I appreciate you sharing here today, Emily.
Thanks.
Oh, got it. And I just want to ask a question. We did get one final question here. I'm going to put it up, and maybe you can answer this before we wrap up here. Let me see if I can put it for you to answer. Maybe. So Wilson asked the question, which I think is interesting as you think about the automation you shared. Are there any regulations that could impact what you do for automation?
So all the equipment has to be like food grade. So there's a lot of rules on that. So we can't just use, you know, any old things like, so it's a lot of stainless steel. There's aluminum. The belts tend to all be blue. You know, there's just, I think probably a lot of the equipment is just more expensive than it would be with other things that were not food, because we really want to prevent, we don't want grease, any grease that might come into contact with the food has to be food safe. Yeah. So there's more things to think about, and it makes it a little more complex because what we're making is food, and we don't want, you know, metal filings. We don't want nasty things going into the food. So then the belts, you'll see like on the video you saw, the belts were blue. That's pretty standard in the food industry. So that way, if the belt frays at all and it winds up in the food, that blue pops compared, you know, it's a high contrast compared to the dough versus if we just used all, you know, white belts, for instance. So yeah,
Okay.
it definitely makes it a little more complicated, but there's a whole world of food automation, and they have been working on that. And there's a ton of things off the shelf, and it's really cool to now be bigger. And it's like, well, if I'm gonna spend $350,000 with someone, like, yeah, there's a back and forth, and we're customizing it and tweaking it to my needs. I'm not stuck with buying things purely off the shelf.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm sure Wilson, thanks for the question. So just as we wrap up, then I want to thank you, Emily, for taking the time to join us and share your insights and take a pause from the factory, you know, from making the bagels. I should ask, if people want to order your bagels, how do they do that?
Sure. Check out our website, www.boichikbagels.com, and it's spelled this way.
Boichik.
Yes.
Got it.
And we do, yeah. So we're in Northern California. We're now in LA, and we do nationwide mail order.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. So really appreciate learning about bagel baking today. It's great. So just to wrap up, the Industry 4.0 Club would like to encourage you to take some action to advance the deployment of Industry 4.0. And what we've seen, I mean, Emily's a great example. You can apply the principles to many, many different things. In this case, you personally might read an article, attend a workshop, develop develop a smart manufacturing roadmap, or encourage those around you to take action. Whatever you do, let's try to make some advancement in the deployment of Industry 4.0. The club would like to know what actions you're taking. So if you would, drop us a note on our website at www.industry40club.com or on our LinkedIn page. We also host conversations like this weekly. If you'd like to talk about a topic with us, please drop us a note as well, and we'll get a chance to follow up with you, and maybe we can have you on a future broadcast. So on behalf of the club, Mike, Emily, thank you for joining us, and we want to wish everybody a wonderful day and a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Emily.
Bye.